Lenore Blackwood's head snapped sideways with a crack that silenced the entire diner. 79 years old, barely 90 pounds. Her body crumpled against the counter, blood streaming from her split lip pooling on the cold tile floor. The impact had opened a gash above her left eye, crimson spreading like spilled wine. Victor Harrington flexed his hand, smiled. That same cold reptilian smile that had destroyed better people than this old woman. 48 hours, Mrs. Blackwood. Sign the deed or I'll bury you in an unmarked grave where even God can't find you. 50 witnesses. Complete silence. Absolute terror. None of them knew her son was a Hell's Angel. None of them knew he'd disappeared 7 years ago, drowning in guilt over a death he couldn't prevent. 200 miles away, a phone buzzed in a cheap motel room. A video played, and something that had been sleeping for 7 years woke up hungry. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the beginning. To the morning when everything changed. To the moment before the slap that would bring an army of motorcycles screaming across the Arizona desert. Lenore Blackwood's hands moved through the darkness with the certainty of 45 years of ritual. Key in the lock. 3 tumbler clicks. Push the door with your shoulder because the frame swells in summer. Flip the breaker switches left to right. Fluorescent lights stuttering to life, casting harsh shadows across red vinyl booths and a counter worn smooth by 10,000 elbows. The Sunrise Diner hadn't changed since 1978. Same jukebox in the corner unplugged for a decade. Same Formica tables with cigarette burns from when smoking was still allowed. Same photograph of a young man in a leather jacket hidden behind the sugar jar where only Lenore could see it. Her son, Garrett. 25 years old in that picture. 52 now if he was still alive. That word had haunted her for 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of waiting for a phone call that never came. A knock on the door that never sounded a glimpse of that familiar silhouette that never materialized. Lenore lifted the photograph. Dust particles danced in the pre-dawn light. Garrett's face stared back at her, frozen in time. That wild grin, those eyes that had seen too much even then. "Where are you, baby?" she whispered to the empty diner. The photograph had no answer. It never did. She set it back behind the sugar jar, precisely in the same spot, precisely the same angle. Some rituals you don't break even when they break your heart. The coffee maker gurgled to life. Dark roast, same blend Frank had used when he first opened this place. Back when Dusty Ridge was actually thriving. Back when the copper mine was still running and men came off shift with dirty hands and full wallets. Back when the future looked like something worth believing in. Frank Blackwood had built this diner brick by brick. Literally, Lenore had watched him lay the foundation in the scorching summer of 1907, sweat pouring down his back. Hands blistered and bleeding. He'd refused help, said a man's legacy should be built by his own hands. "This is for our boy," he told her one evening, pointing to the hand-painted sign that would hang above the door. "Someday Garrett will run this place. Someday he'll understand what it means to build something that lasts." But Frank never saw his 50th birthday. A mining accident in 1998. Roof collapse. 3 men dead instantly. Frank had lingered for 2 days holding Lenore's hand, whispering apologies he didn't need to make. 12 years in the ground now. 12 years of waking up alone. 12 years of running this diner by herself because selling it would mean admitting that everything Frank had built didn't matter anymore. Lenore poured herself coffee. Black, no sugar. The first sip burned her tongue the way it always did, the way it was supposed to. Her hands shook slightly. Not from age. From the medication she couldn't afford to keep taking. The pills that kept the pain manageable. The pills that cost $300 a month on a Social Security check that barely covered rent. But she didn't think about that. Couldn't think about that. Not yet. Not while there was work to do. She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs into a steel bowl, whisking them until the yolks broke and blended, firing up the grill until the surface shimmered with heat, laying out strips of bacon in perfect parallel lines. Every movement was muscle memory. Every step was choreography she'd performed 10,000 times. This was her church. This was her prayer. This was the only thing she had left that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense a long time ago. Outside, the Arizona desert began to wake. Dawn crept over the horizon, turning the sky from black to purple to that particular shade of orange that only exists in the high desert. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels in the distance. The highway stretched empty in both directions. Dusty Ridge, Arizona. Population 847. Down from 2 to 100 in the mining days. A town that was slowly dying, one closed storefront at a time. But the Sunrise Diner still stood, still served breakfast, still kept the lights on. The bell above the door chimed at 6:15. Ivy Fletcher stumbled in, her 4-year-old daughter Chloe half asleep on her shoulder. Dark circles under Ivy's eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The exhaustion that comes from being a 28-year-old single mother working 2 jobs and still barely making rent. "You're early again, Mrs. Blackwood." Lenore didn't look up from the grill. "Couldn't sleep." "You never sleep." That was true. Sleep had become something other people did. Something that required peace of mind, and Lenore Blackwood's mind hadn't been peaceful since the night Garrett walked out of her life. Ivy laid Chloe on the old cot in the back office, tucked a blanket around her small shoulders, kissed her forehead with a gentleness that made Lenore's chest ache. She remembered kissing Garrett like that, remembered thinking that as long as she loved him enough, nothing bad could ever happen. She'd been wrong about that. "Bad dreams again?" Lenore asked, watching Ivy emerge from the office. Ivy grabbed an apron, tied it with practiced efficiency. "Same nightmare. Landlord showing up. Eviction notice. Chloe and me sleeping in the car." "That's not going to happen, Theresa. You don't know that, Mrs. Blackwood. Rent went up again. 3rd time this year. I'm already 2 weeks behind." Lenore cracked another egg on the grill's edge. Perfect one-handed technique. "You'll make it work. You always do." "I don't know how much longer I can keep saying that." Ivy Hung had shown up at this diner 5 years ago. 5 months pregnant, no references, no experience, desperation written across every line of her face. Every other business in town had slammed doors in her face. Single mother, no father in the picture, no family to fall back on. Lenore hadn't asked a single question, just handed her an apron and said, "You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Now Ivy was the best waitress Lenore had ever had. Fast, efficient, remembered every regular's order, never complained, never called in sick, even when she should have. "He's not coming back, Mrs. Blackwood." Ivy's voice was gentle, careful. "It's been 7 years." "I know." "Then why do you keep watching that road?" Lenore finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, though she'd swear it was just steam from the grill. "Because that's what mothers do, sweetheart. We wait, we hope. We refuse to believe that the worst thing we can imagine has already happened." The bell chimed again at 7:30. Henry Castellanos, owner of the hardware store 3 doors down. 62 years old, flannel shirt, work boots, hands calloused from a lifetime of honest labor. He slid onto his usual stool at the counter. Same stool he'd occupied every morning for 20 years. Lenore poured his coffee before he could ask. Black 2 sugars, pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs. He never ordered anything else. "Morning, Nora." Only Henry still used her nickname. Everyone else had switched to Mrs. Blackwood after Frank died. Formal, respectful, distant. But Henry had been Frank's best friend, had helped him lay the foundation of this diner, had stood beside Lenore at the funeral, holding her up when her legs couldn't. Henry. He dumped sugar into his coffee, stirred it slowly, not looking at her. That meant bad news. Henry only avoided eye contact when he had to deliver bad news. "We need to talk." "I'm busy, Henry." "Town meeting last night. Harrington's making his move." Lenore's hand froze mid-pour. Coffee overflowed Henry's cup, spilling across the counter. She grabbed a rag, wiped it up with sharp, angry movements. "What kind of move?" Henry lowered his voice, even though the diner was mostly empty. Old habit from the mining days when the foremen were always listening. "Final offer. Everyone on this block either sells by Friday or faces consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The Garcia family. Someone slashed their tires. All 4 cars. Same night they refused to sign." Lenore's jaw tightened. "That's illegal." "So is half of what Victor Harrington does, but he owns the sheriff, owns the mayor. Hell, he probably owns the judge too." "I'm not selling, Henry." "Nora, my husband built this place brick by brick. He died before he could see our 30th anniversary. But this diner," her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced the words out. "This is his legacy. I'm not handing it to some developer so he can build a casino." Henry shook his head slowly. "Frank would want you safe more than he'd want the diner standing. Frank would want me to fight." "Frank's dead, Nora, and if you're not careful, you will be too." The words hung in the air like smoke. Heavy, suffocating. By 8:30, the diner was packed. Truckers stopping for breakfast on the long haul between Phoenix and Albuquerque. Ranchers grabbing coffee before heading out to check fence lines. A few tourists taking pictures of the vintage authenticity, like poverty was some kind of aesthetic choice. Lenore moved through the chaos with the grace of long practice, refilling cups without being asked, remembering orders without writing them down, calling regulars by name. This was her gift. This was what she did. She made people feel seen, feel welcome, feel like they mattered. And in a world that increasingly made people feel invisible, that was worth something. It was 9:17 when the front door exploded open. Everyone froze. Victor Harrington walked in like he'd bought the place yesterday and was checking on his investment. Expensive suit tailored perfectly. Gold watch catching the fluorescent light. Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people in Dusty Ridge made in a month. The kind of confidence that comes from hurting people who can't fight back. Two men flanked him. Carl, ex-prison guard, did 3 years for assault before Harrington bailed him out. 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle, and barely suppressed violence. Dayton. Nobody knew his last name. Nobody asked. The scars on his knuckles told enough of his story. Victor scanned the room slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw him, making sure everyone understood who held power in this town. His eyes found Lenore. He smiled. Mrs. Blackwood, just who I wanted to see. Lenore set down her coffee pot, wiped her hands on her apron, stood her ground. Mr. Harrington, I believe my answer was clear. Answers change. Mine don't. He walked toward her, slow, deliberate, each step making someone flinch, each step reminding everyone in the room of exactly who they were dealing with. He slid into a booth across from her, uninvited, unwelcome. Let me paint you a picture, he said, voice smooth as expensive bourbon. Phoenix Crown Development is offering you $80,000 above market value. That's not a negotiation. That's a gift. I don't want your gift. Everyone wants money, Mrs. Blackwood. I want to die in the place my husband built. That's worth more than anything you can offer. Victor leaned close. His breath reeked of last night's bourbon and this morning's cigarettes. Your husband's been rotting in the ground for 12 years. He doesn't care about this diner. He doesn't care about anything because dead men don't have opinions. The room went silent. Lenore's voice didn't waver. Get out. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. Victor Harrington had broken men twice his size. He'd made mayors cry, made police chiefs beg, made entire town councils vote against their own interests out of pure fear. But this 79-year-old woman looked at him like he was nothing, and something in him snapped. He stood, adjusted his jacket, that smile spreading across his face again, the smile that made people disappear. You know, I did some digging, interesting family. You've got Mrs. Blackwood. Lenore's face changed, just barely, just at enough. Dead husband, no siblings, one son. Every muscle in her body went rigid. Garrett Blackwood ran with the Hells Angels, big bad biker until he got a kid killed and ran away like a coward. Don't what? Tell the truth, Victor laughed. Cold, cruel. Your son let a 22-year-old boy bleed to death on the highway. Then he disappeared, no funeral, no apology, just gone. 7 years of nothing. You don't know anything about my son. I know he's not here. I know he abandoned you. I know that when I take this diner, and I will take it, there's not a damn thing anyone can do to stop me. Lenore stood, all 5 feet of her looking up at this monster. My son made mistakes, but he's more of a man than you'll ever be. Victor's eye twitched. What did you say? You heard me. The slap came so fast most people didn't even see it happen. One moment Lenore was standing. The next she was airborne. Her body hit the counter edge with a sickening crack. She crumpled to the floor, blood already streaming from her split lip and the gash above her eye. The entire diner gasped. Someone screamed. Ivy had been behind the counter phone already recording. She stuffed her fist in her mouth to keep from making a sound, tears streaming down her face. But she kept the camera steady, kept filming. Victor stood over Lenore, breathing hard. His hand was shaking. Not from pain, from fury. 48 hours old, woman. Sign the papers or I'll make sure you're buried in an unmarked grave where even God can't find you. He grabbed the unsigned contract from his pocket, crumpled it, threw it at her bleeding face. Then he straightened his tie, fixed his hair, became the businessman again. Oh, and if your coward son does show up, he smiled down at her. Tell him Victor Harrington doesn't scare. Tell him I'll do to him what I did to you, only slower. The door slammed behind him. The black SUV's engine roared to life. Tires squealed as they peeled out of the parking lot. Ivy burst from behind the counter the second the vehicles disappeared. Mrs. Blackwood, oh God. Lenore was trying to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Blood soaking through the towel Ivy pressed against the gash. I'm fine. You're bleeding. I've had worse. We have to call the police. Lenore grabbed Ivy's hand, squeezed hard. The police work for him, sweetheart. Then the state police, the FBI. Someone. There's no one. Lenore's voice was steady, resigned. This town is his. The law is his. We're on our own. There has to be something we can do. There isn't. Ivy looked at this woman, 79 years old, blood on her face, bruises already forming, and still refusing to break. What about Garrett? Lenore closed her eyes. He's not coming. You don't know that. He hasn't called in 7 years, hasn't visited, hasn't... Her voice finally cracked. He's gone, Ivy. My son is gone. But Ivy Fletcher had survived too much to watch the only person who'd ever believed in her die at the hands of some rich psychopath. That night, after closing, after cleaning Lenore's wounds, after getting her settled in the small apartment above the diner, Ivy sat in her car. Chloe was asleep in the back seat, thumb in her mouth, oblivious to the weight of what her mother was about to do. The video was loaded on Ivy's phone. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of pure evidence. Victor Harrington's voice clear as a bell. The slap caught in perfect, horrifying detail. Lenore's body hitting the floor. Blood spreading across tile. Ivy had spent 3 months tracking down this number. A friend of a biker who knew where Garrett Reaper Blackwood had last been seen. A Barstow area code. Probably a burner phone. Probably disconnected. But maybe not. She typed 3 words. They hurt your mother. Attach the video. Her thumb hovered over send. Mrs. Blackwood had said not to, had begged her not to, had said Garrett was gone for good reasons, that dragging him back would only cause more pain. But Ivy Fletcher had been that scared pregnant girl 5 years ago, standing in the rain outside this diner, hoping someone would give her a chance. And Lenore Blackwood had opened the door without hesitation. Some debts you can't repay with money. Ivy pressed send. Garrett Blackwood woke from the nightmare screaming. Same dream. Every night for 7 years. The truck running the red light. The screech of metal on metal. Ethan Wade's body crushed under 2 tons of twisted steel. Help me, Reaper. Please, it hurts. It hurts so bad. In the dream, Garrett could never reach him, could never save him, could only watch as the light faded from Ethan's eyes while his mother's voice screamed from somewhere in the distance. You were supposed to protect him. You were supposed to keep him safe. Garrett sat up in the cheap motel bed, drenched in sweat, hands shaking, heart hammering against his ribs. Ethan Wade, 22 years old, bright future ahead of him, dead because Garrett wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough. He grabbed the bottle from the nightstand, whiskey, bottom shelf, the kind that burned going down and did nothing to kill the memories. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, unknown number, video attachment. Probably spam, probably nothing. He almost deleted it, almost threw the phone across the room and went back to drinking until the sun came up and another day of existing began. But something made him press play. The video loaded, and Garrett Blackwood's world ended. His mother, on the floor, blood on her face, a man standing over her, laughing. 48 hours, sign or I'll bury you next to your husband in an unmarked grave. Garrett watched it again, and again, and again. His hands started shaking, vision blurring. 7 years. 7 years he'd stayed away because he thought he didn't deserve her, because he thought his guilt made him poison, because he thought she was better off without him. And while he was hiding, someone was hurting her. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, put his fist through the drywall. Once, twice, 3 times, until his knuckles were bleeding and the pain in his hands almost matched the pain in his chest. He screamed until his throat tore, until the neighbors pounded on the walls, until there was nothing left inside him but fury. Then he went outside. The Harley sat under a tarp behind the motel. 3 years since he'd touched it. 3 years since he'd ridden anything. The bike was exactly as he'd left it. Black paint, chrome pipes, the Hells Angels patch still on the saddlebag. He'd earned that patch through blood and brotherhood, through years of loyalty that most people would never understand, and he'd walked away from it. Because of Ethan, because of guilt, because he thought running would make the pain stop. It never did. Garrett ran his hand over the gas tank, over the handlebars, over the patch that had defined him for 20 years. Then he pulled out a second phone, the one he'd kept charged for 7 years, even though he'd never used it, the one with only 3 numbers programmed into it. He dialed. 3 rings. Who the hell is this? The voice was rough, suspicious, but Garrett would recognize it anywhere. Wolfhound, it's Reaper. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. You've got some nerve calling this number. I know. 7 years, Garrett. Not one word. We thought you were dead. I know. You abandoned your brothers, abandoned the club, abandoned that boy's mother who still cries at his grave every Sunday. Garrett's voice broke. I know. Then why are you calling? He closed his eyes, saw his mother's face covered in blood, saw her body crumpling to the floor, saw 7 years of abandonment crystallized in one 3-minute video. Someone hurt my mother. The line went quiet. Say that again. Some developer tried to force her to sell her diner. When she refused, he hit her, threatened her, sent someone a video to make sure I knew she was suffering. More silence. Then Wolfhound's voice cold as winter steel. Where are you, Barstow? She's in Dusty Ridge. Yeah. We'll be there tomorrow, noon. Garrett's throat tightened. Wolfhound, don't. This isn't forgiveness. This is family. And nobody touches family. Not even family that ran away. The line went dead. Garrett stared at the bike for a long time. 3 years since he'd ridden. 3 years since he'd felt the wind on his face or the engine beneath him. He'd told himself he didn't deserve it. That men who let boys die shouldn't feel freedom. But his mother was bleeding. And some things were bigger than guilt. He threw his leg over the seat, turned the key. The Harley roared to life. The sound echoed across the empty parking lot. Pure. Primal. Perfect. Garrett Blackwood hadn't been Reaper in 7 years. Tonight Reaper was riding home. The desert highway stretched ahead of him. Dark. Empty. 200 miles of asphalt between him and the woman who'd given him life. 200 miles between the man he'd become and the son he used to be. He twisted the throttle. The bike surged forward, wind screaming past his ears, engine thunder drowning out the voices in his head. And somewhere ahead, in a small town in Arizona, an old woman sat by her window at 2 a.m., ice on her split lip, bandage above her eye, watching the empty road like she'd done every night for 7 years, waiting for a sound she'd given up hope of ever hearing again. The distant rumble of a Harley-Davidson, growing louder. Henry Castellano stepped out of the hardware store balancing a box of nails and his third cup of coffee. The morning heat was already brutal, 103 degrees, and it wasn't even noon yet. He heard it before he saw it. Low, distant, like thunder rolling across the desert floor. Henry set down the box, looked toward the highway. Nothing but heat shimmer and empty asphalt stretching to the horizon. But the sound was growing. Not thunder. Engines. One motorcycle crested the hill on Route 66. Chrome blazing in the Arizona sun. Black leather. Hell's Angels patch visible, even from a quarter mile away. Henry's coffee slipped from his fingers. The cup shattered on the sidewalk because the one motorcycle became 10, then 30. Then 93 bikes rolling into Dusty Ridge in perfect V formation, engines synchronized like a military parade. The sound shook windows, rattled doors, made the ground vibrate beneath Henry's feet. People emerged from stores, from homes, from the post office and the bank and the empty lot where the movie theater used to be. Everyone staring, everyone frozen. The Hells Angels came to a stop in the middle of Main Street. Engines cut simultaneously. Silence crashed down like a physical force. At the front of the formation sat a man on a black Harley-Davidson, 52 years old, gray threaded through his beard, eyes that had seen things civilians couldn't imagine. The kind of stillness that only comes from violence survived and lessons learned the hard way. Garrett Blackwood had come home. Inside the Sunrise Diner, Lenore was wiping down tables. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple and black. The gash above her eyebrow held together with butterfly bandages. Her lip was split. Every movement sent pain shooting through her ribs where she'd hit the counter. But she was working, because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant remembering Victor Harrington's fist connecting with her face. Remembering the taste of blood. Remembering the certainty that she was about to die alone on the floor of the diner her husband built. Ivy had spent the night in the apartment upstairs, refusing to leave Lenore alone. Chloe was coloring at a booth by the window, humming to herself, oblivious to the bruises on the woman she called Grandma Nora. The roar of engines made Lenore freeze. She knew that sound, knew it in her bones, in her blood, in every cell of her body that had spent 7 years listening for it. The rag fell from her hands. Mrs. Blackwood. Ivy's voice was trembling. There's a lot of motorcycles outside. Lenore was already moving. She pushed through the door, stepped into the blinding sunlight, and there he was. Garrett Blackwood, her Jackie, standing in the middle of Main Street surrounded by 93 Hells Angels, 7 years of silence between them. He looked older, harder, broken in ways sleep couldn't fix, gray in his beard that hadn't been there before, lines around his eyes that spoke of nights without rest and days without purpose. But he was here. Ma, his voice cracked on the word. That single syllable carrying 7 years of guilt and grief and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't turn him away. Lenore walked toward him, past the motorcycles, past the bikers who parted like she was made of something holy. Her slippers scraped against asphalt. Her bathrobe fluttered in the hot wind. She stopped in front of her son and slapped him across the face. 93 Hells Angels went dead silent. The sound echoed across Main Street. Sharp, final, a judgment delivered. 7 years. Lenore's voice shook with fury and love and pain that had been compressed into a diamond-hard core. 7 years without a word. I thought you were dead, Garrett. I prayed over your picture every night. I wrote letters you never answered. I left voicemails you never returned. Garrett didn't move, didn't defend himself, just stood there and took it. Because he deserved it. Because he'd earned every ounce of her rage. I'm sorry, Ma. Sorry. She hit his chest. You're sorry. She hit him again. Again, each blow weaker than the last, until her hands were just resting against his leather jacket, feeling the heartbeat underneath. Proof that he was real, that he was alive, that he'd actually come back. I beg God to bring you home, she whispered. Every single day for 7 years, I begged. I know. Then why, Garrett? Why did you stay away? He looked at her. This woman who had given him everything, who had loved him when he was unlovable, who had never stopped believing in him even when he'd stopped believing in himself. Because I got Ethan killed. Because every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a murderer. Because I thought you'd be better off without me. Better off? Lenore grabbed his face, forced him to look at her, to see past his own guilt to the truth she'd been carrying alone. I lost your father to a mining accident. I almost lost you to that motorcycle life. And then I lost you anyway because you decided my love wasn't enough to stay for. Ma, I don't care what you did. Her voice broke. I don't care who you think you are. You're my son, and I have never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. Not for one breath. Garrett fell to his knees in the middle of Main Street, wrapped his arms around his mother, and sobbed like a child. Lenore held him, just held him while 93 Hells Angels stood guard around them. While the town of Dusty Ridge watched something they'd never expected to see. A prodigal son coming home. A mother's love refusing to diss even when everything else had. The man who climbed off his own bike was a different kind of intimidating. Colonel Nash Wolfhound Garrett, 62 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle that hadn't gone soft despite retirement. Silver hair cut military short. A scar running from his left temple to his jaw, courtesy of an IED outside Fallujah. Purple heart pinned to his vest. POWWMEA flag patch on his shoulder. Unit insignia from the 101st Airborne visible on his jacket. He approached Lenore with the careful respect of a man who understood exactly what strength looked like. Mrs. Blackwood, you must be the mother. Lenore wiped her eyes, straightened her spine. Even at 5 feet tall, with a face covered in bruises, she had the presence of someone who'd survived things that would have destroyed weaker people. And you must be Wolfhound. Garrett said you were the closest thing he had to a brother. He said the same about you, ma'am. Said you were the toughest woman he'd ever known. Wolfhound's voice was gravel and smoke. Looks like he was right. I don't feel very tough right now. Tough isn't about how you feel. It's about what you do when you're broken. He gestured toward the diner. Mind if we come inside? Got some things to explain before this town decides we're here to cause trouble. 10 minutes later, 93 Hells Angels were scattered across Main Street, some sitting on their bikes, some standing in groups, all of them watching, waiting. But the core group, Wolfhound Garrett and 5 other senior members, sat in the Sunrise Diner's biggest booth. Ivy poured coffee with shaking hands. Chloe had crawled into Garrett's lap without asking, recognizing something safe in this stranger with kind eyes. Wolfhound wrapped his scarred hands around the coffee cup. Mrs. Blackwood, I need you to understand something. We're not a gang, we're not criminals. We're Lily's Legacy Foundation, 501c3 nonprofit, been operating for 20 years. Lenore sat across from him, ice pack pressed to her swollen eye. I don't understand. I had a daughter once, Lily, prettiest little girl you ever saw, blonde hair, blue eyes, laugh that could light up a room. His voice went rough. She was 7 years old when she got sick. Leukemia, aggressive, the kind that moves fast. He pulled out a worn photograph. A little girl in a hospital bed, bald from chemotherapy, smiling despite the tubes and wires. I was Special Forces. Good pay. Good benefits. Should have been enough. Wolfhound's jaw tightened, but the insurance company found a loophole. Denied coverage. We needed $200,000 for the treatment that might save her, might give her a chance. Lenore's hand went to her mouth. I sold everything. House, cars, called in every favor, begged everyone I knew. Got to 160,000. Not enough, not nearly enough. He stared at the photograph. Lily died 3 weeks later, in my arms, asking me why I couldn't make the hurt stop. The diner was silent except for the hum of the ancient air conditioner. Her last words were, "Promise me you'll help other kids, Daddy. Promise you won't let this happen to anyone else." Wolfhound looked up. So I made her a promise. Started this foundation with 11 other veterans. We find good people in impossible situations. People the system failed. People who did everything right and still got crushed. He pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs, testimonials, IRS documents. 20 years, Mrs. Blackwood. 3,000 families helped. $12 million in medical bills paid. 187 homes saved from foreclosure. 423 veterans given housing and jobs. 89 kids sent to college who couldn't afford it otherwise. Lenore stared at the documents. This is real. Every word. We're not Hell's Angels pretending to be good guys. We're veterans who ride motorcycles and refuse to let good people suffer when we can do something about it. But why would you come here? For me, you don't even know me. Wolfhound glanced at Garrett, who was still holding Chloe, the little girl, having fallen asleep against his chest. Your son called, said someone hurt his mother. That's all we needed to hear. He leaned forward. But there's more to it than that, ma'am. See, I did some research after Garrett called. Asked around about Lenore Blackwood, about the Sunrise Diner. He pulled out another photograph. Older, faded. A young woman in military fatigue standing next to a Humvee in the Iraqi desert. Lenore's breath caught. You recognize this picture. That's me. 23 years ago, I was an Army medic stationed outside Fallujah. March 2004, Battle of Fallujah. You ran into active gunfire to pull out a wounded soldier. Took 3 insurgent rounds. One shattered your collarbone. One punctured your lung. One went through your thigh. Wolfhound's voice was steady, reverent. You kept that soldier alive for 40 minutes while waiting for evac. Refused morphine because you said you needed to stay alert in case he crashed. Tears were streaming down Lenore's face. That soldier was Staff Sergeant Marcus Fletcher. He died 2 years ago. Cancer. But he lived long enough to see his daughter graduate college. Long enough to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Long enough to hold his grandson. Wolfhound's voice cracked. He lived long enough because you refused to let him die. The connection clicked in Lenore's mind. Fletcher, Ivy Fletcher. Wolfhound nodded. Marcus was her father. He talked about you all the time. The medic who saved his life. He tried to find you for years. But you'd gotten married, changed your name, moved to Arizona. Ivy was crying now, hands over her mouth. When I saw the video of you being attacked, Wolfhound continued, I made some calls, found out Ivy was working here, found out Marcus Fletcher's daughter was being raised by the woman who gave her father 20 extra years of life. He stood. The other 5 bikers stood with him. Mrs. Blackwood, you saved my brother's life. You gave Ivy her father. You gave that little girl sleeping on Garrett's lap her grandfather. And we don't forget debts like that. We don't abandon the people who bled for us. Before Lenore could respond, the diner door opened. A woman stepped inside. Mid-50s, graying hair, eyes red from crying. She held a photograph in trembling hands. Mrs. Blackwood. Lenore recognized her immediately. Miriam Wade, Ethan's mother. The woman whose son had died while riding with Garrett. The woman who'd spat in Garrett's face at the funeral. Garrett stood abruptly, setting Chloe gently in the booth. Miriam, I'm sorry. Stop. Miriam's voice was thick. Just stop. She walked past him, walked directly to Lenore, set the photograph on the table. It was Ethan, 22 years old, bright smile, leather jacket, standing next to Garrett, both of them grinning at the camera. I came to tell you something, Miriam said to Lenore, something I should have said 7 years ago instead of blaming your son. She turned to Garrett. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. Ethan wrote me a letter 2 weeks before he died. I found it in his jacket pocket after the accident. I've been carrying it for 7 years, waiting for the right time to give it to you. She pulled an envelope from her purse, worn, stained, the paper soft from being handled too many times. Garrett took it with shaking hands. He loved you, Garrett. He looked up to you more than anyone in the world, and he forgave you before there was even anything to forgive. Garrett couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Miriam turned back to Lenore. Your son didn't kill my boy. A drunk driver running a red light killed my boy. And I spent 7 years punishing the wrong person because I needed someone to blame. She reached out, took Lenore's bruised hands in hers. Thank you for raising a man worth following. Thank you for giving the world someone who cared enough about my son to carry guilt that wasn't his to carry. Outside, the sound of vehicles approaching. Multiple engines. The distinctive rumble of V8 trucks. Henry burst through the door. Nora, it's the sheriff, and he's got a lot of backup. Lenore stood, walked to the window. 6 sheriff's department vehicles, 2 state police cruisers, all parked in a semicircle around the bikers. Sheriff Raymond Caldwell stepped out, 55 years old, 20 pounds overweight, hand resting on his service weapon like he was hoping for an excuse to use it. This is Sheriff Caldwell. I'm ordering all of you to disperse immediately. You're in violation of unlawful assembly ordinances. Wolfhound stepped out of the diner, hands visible, non-threatening, but his voice carried the authority of someone who'd given orders in actual combat zones. Sheriff, we're not here to cause trouble. We're visiting a friend. Last I checked, that's not a crime. You're Hell's Angels. You're a known criminal organization. We're Lily's Legacy Foundation, 501c3 nonprofit, fully licensed, fully legitimate. I've got the IRS documentation if you'd like to see it. Caldwell's hand tightened on his weapon. I don't care what kind of paperwork you're hiding behind. I want you gone, now. Can't do that, Sheriff. Then I'll arrest every last one of you for what? Wolfhound's voice was calm, cold. Parking legally on a public street, having a cup of coffee, visiting a woman who was assaulted yesterday by a man you haven't arrested. Caldwell's face went red. I don't know what you're talking about. No, Wolfhound pulled out his phone. Because I've got video evidence of Victor Harrington assaulting Mrs. Blackwood in her own diner. Want to explain why he's not in a cell right now. The crowd was growing, more townspeople emerging. Phones out, recording. Before Caldwell could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Raymond Joseph Caldwell. An old woman pushed through the crowd, 80 years old if she was a day, white hair pulled back in a severe bun, walking stick tapping against asphalt, eyes blazing with fury that made her look 20 years younger. Sheriff Caldwell went pale. Mom, what are you? Don't you mom me. Edith Caldwell planted herself between her son and the bikers. What exactly do you think you're doing? Ma'am, this is official police business. Official police business. She turned to face the crowd. How many of you saw what happened to Lenore Blackwood yesterday? Saw Victor Harrington hit her? Silence. People looked at the ground, at their shoes, anywhere but at Edith Caldwell's accusing stare. That's what I thought. 50 people watched a developer assault a 79-year-old woman, and not one of you called the police. Not one of you did anything. She spun back to her son. And you knew. Victor Harrington owns you, owns half this town, and you were going to let him get away with it. Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Edith's voice cracked. Your father was sheriff for 30 years. 30 years of protecting people, of standing up for what's right even when it was hard, even when it cost him. She pointed her walking stick at the Purple Heart on Wolfhound's vest. These men served their country. They bled for people they'd never met. And now they're here protecting one old woman because her own town won't. Tears streamed down her weathered face. Your father would be ashamed of you, Raymond, and I'm ashamed of you. The silence was absolute. Sheriff Caldwell stood frozen. 20 years of compromises, 20 years of looking the other way, 20 years of choosing the easy path over the right one. And his mother, the woman who'd raised him, to be better calling him out in front of everyone. He looked at Lenore, at the bruises on her face, at the evidence of his failure written across her body. Then he looked at Wolfhound, at the Purple Heart, at 93 men who'd dropped everything to defend a stranger. Something cracked in Raymond Caldwell's face. He turned to his deputies. Stand down. Sir, I said stand down. His voice was hollow, defeated. These men aren't breaking any laws. He walked back to his cruiser, sat in the driver's seat, and for the first time in 20 years, Raymond Caldwell put his face in his hands and cried. The crowd began to shift. One person stepped forward, then another, a woman in her 40s. Mrs. Blackwood, these men, they paid for my son's heart transplant 3 years ago. We couldn't afford it. The insurance denied coverage. They gave us $80,000, no strings attached. An elderly man. They saved my mother's house when the bank was foreclosing, paid off the mortgage, said they didn't want another veteran's widow losing her home. A teenager. They gave me a full-ride scholarship. I'm studying pre-med now, because of them. One by one, people stepped forward, people the foundation had helped, people who'd been saved by these criminals when their own community had turned away. And one by one, they apologized to Lenore for not standing up yesterday, for not calling the police, for being too afraid of Victor Harrington to do the right thing. Lenore stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed. These rough men in leather and patches had done more for her town than she'd ever known, had helped more people than she could count, and they'd come when she needed them most. Wolfhound put a hand on Garrett's shoulder. "We're not leaving, brother. Not until this is finished." Garrett looked at his mother, at the tears streaming down her face, at the community finally coming together around her. "Thank you," he whispered. "That's what family does." Inside the diner, after the crowd dispersed, after promises were made and plans discussed, Lenore found herself alone with Garrett in the back office. The same office where Frank used to do the books, where Garrett used to do his homework as a boy, where everything important in their small lives had always happened. "Ma, I need to ask you something." "Anything, baby." Garrett's voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you sell? You could have taken the money, moved somewhere safe, started over." Lenore sat down heavily. The adrenaline was fading, the pain was coming back, sharp, insistent. "Your father proposed to me in this diner. Did you know that?" Garrett shook his head. "We were 22, broke, scared. He got down on one knee right there by the jukebox and asked me to build a life with him." Her eyes went distant. "We poured everything into this place, every penny, every dream, every hope we had for the future." She looked at her son. "When your father died, I wanted to die too. I wanted to sell everything and disappear. But then I realized this diner isn't just a building. It's not just a business. It's him. It's every memory I have of him. Every laugh, every fight, every quiet morning drinking coffee together before the customers arrived." Her voice broke. "If I sell this diner, I lose the last piece of Frank I have left. And I won't do that. Not for Victor Harrington, not for anyone." Garrett reached across and took her hand. "I wish I'd been here, Ma, when Dad died, when you needed me. You were dealing with your own demons. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not." She squeezed his hand. "But you're here now. That's what matters." "There's something else." Garrett's voice changed, became careful. "Something you need to know." Lenore felt ice forming in her stomach. She knew that tone. That was the tone that preceded life-changing news. "Ma, when did you last see a doctor?" "I'm fine, Garrett." "When?" She looked away. 3 months ago." And the silence stretched. Outside, bikers laughed. Engines rumbled. Life continued like the world wasn't about to crack open. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words hung in the air like smoke. Heavy, suffocating. Garrett's face went white. No, there must be a mistake." "There's no mistake, baby. I've known for 3 months." "How long?" 6 months, maybe less." "We'll fight it." Garrett's voice was desperate, frantic. "Seconds opinions, specialists, experimental treatments, whatever it takes." Lenore reached up, touched his face. "Garrett, I'm 79 years old. I've lived a full life, a good life. That's not, you can't just, I want to spend my last months right here in this diner, with you, with the people I love, not in some hospital being poisoned by chemicals that might buy me a few more weeks." "Ma, please." "I'm not asking for permission, sweetheart. I'm telling you how this is going to be." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You don't get to come back into my life and immediately start making my decisions for me." Garrett broke. He fell to his knees, put his head in his mother's lap, and cried. Lenore ran her fingers through his hair like she'd done when he was a boy, soothing, endless, the way mothers do. "It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay." But it wasn't okay. And they both knew it. At 3 a.m., glass shattered. Garrett was downstairs, instantly moving through the dark diner with the automatic precision of someone trained for combat. Wolfhound appeared beside him, equally silent, equally deadly. The back window was broken, and beyond it, the storage shed was burning. Flames licked up the wooden walls, consuming everything inside. 40 years of Frank Blackwood's tools, his workbench, the chair he'd made for Lenore on their 10th anniversary. Memories turning to ash and smoke. Lenore appeared in her bathrobe, stared at the fire. "Ma, get back inside." "No." Her voice was flat, empty. "I'm done hiding." She walked toward the burning shed. Garrett grabbed her arm. "It's not safe." "Nothing's safe anymore, Garrett." She pulled free, kept walking. She stood 10 feet from the flames, close enough to feel the heat, close enough to smell 40 years burning. Garrett stood beside her. "We can rebuild. I'll get Dad's tools replaced. I'll..." Things can be replaced, Garrett. Lenore's voice was steady, resigned. People can't. She watched the shed collapse, watched sparks spiral into the dark sky, watched everything tangible of Frank Blackwood disappear. And she didn't cry, because she'd learned something in 79 years, something that Victor Harrington would never understand. Love isn't stored in objects, it's stored in people, in memories, in the choices we make when everything else is burning down. The shed was gone by dawn, but Lenore Blackwood was still standing, and that was all that mattered. The Phoenix Crown Development headquarters sat dark and silent, 32 floors of steel and glass, Victor Harrington's monument to greed. 6 motorcycles coasted into the underground garage. No headlights, engines cut a block away. Wolfhound and 5 veterans moved through shadows like ghosts. These men had conducted nighttime operations in Fallujah. They knew how to be invisible. The security guard never saw them coming, just felt the hand on his shoulder and looked up into Wolfhound's scarred face. Evening, son. Take a 20-minute break. Coffee's on me. Don't come back until 3:15. The guard looked at the Purple Hearts, the combat patches, the kind of men you don't question. Yes, sir. 30 minutes later, they had everything. 15 years of bribery records, forged documents, payoffs to judges, councilmen, senators, wire transfers to offshore accounts, photographs of deals made in backrooms with criminals and corrupt officials. Victor Harrington had been arrogant, sloppy, convinced his money made him untouchable. By dawn, copies were in the hands of the FBI State Attorney General, 3 news networks, and 1 investigative journalist who'd been hunting Harrington for a decade. The trap was set. The black SUVs arrived like a plague. 12 vehicles, 53 armed men. Victor Harrington stepped out drunk on bourbon and rage. He surveyed Main Street, 93 bikers, townspeople watching from porches, his kingdom crumbling. Last chance, he screamed. Leave now or I burn this entire street to ash. Wolfhound stood, walked to the center, stopped 20 feet from Victor. We're not going anywhere. You're finished, all of you. Victor pulled a pistol. Burn it, burn everything. His thugs charged. 93 Hells Angels met them head on. The fight lasted 10 minutes. Not because the bikers were slow, because they were efficient. These weren't street thugs. These were combat veterans who'd survived Fallujah and Kandahar. Carl swung a bat at Garrett. Garrett ducked, countered with a punch that broke Carl's nose. Second punch cracked ribs. Third put him on the ground unconscious. That's for my mother. All around Victor's hired muscle fell. These weren't fighters. They were bullies who'd never faced real resistance. When confronted with men who'd survived actual combat, they broke. 10 minutes. 53 men running for their vehicles, bloody and beaten. But Victor Harrington didn't run. He stumbled through the chaos, pistol in hand, eyes wild with rage and bourbon, and the realization that his empire was crumbling. He made it to the diner's front door, kicked it open, disappeared inside. Garrett saw him go, started to follow. Wolfhound grabbed his arm. Brother, wait. He's going after her. Then we go together. But Lenore was already inside, had been inside the whole time, waiting. The diner was dark, silent. Victor stumbled through, pistol raised, searching shadows. Lenore, he screamed, I know you're here. I'm right here, Mr. Harrington. Her voice came from the back booth, calm, steady. She was sitting exactly where she'd been sitting 4 days ago when he'd offered to buy her diner. Same booth, same calm expression, like she'd been waiting for him. Victor crossed the distance in 4 strides, aimed the pistol at her heart. You stupid old woman. You could have sold, could have walked away with money in your pocket and your face intact, but you had to be stubborn, had to make this difficult. I'm done being afraid of you. You should be afraid. Spittle flew from his lips. I'm about to kill you. I know. The simple acknowledgement seemed to deflate him slightly. He'd expected begging, crying, the fear he'd built his empire on. Instead, she just looked at him with something that might have been pity. Any last words? His finger tightened on the trigger. I forgive you. Victor froze. What? I forgive you, Mr. Harrington, for hitting me, for threatening me, for burning my husband's tools, for all of it. You're insane. No, I'm free. Lenore's voice was gentle, patient, like she was explaining something to a child. Forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me. I won't die with hate in my heart. I won't give you that power. Shut up. The gun was shaking now. You could have been different, you know. You could have built something real, something that mattered. Instead, you chose fear. You chose cruelty. You chose to hurt people because it made you feel powerful. I said, shut up. And now you're standing in a diner at midnight pointing a gun at a grandmother and calling it victory. Lenore stood slowly, carefully. Is this really how you want your story to end? Victor's face crumpled. The gun wavered. Your parents, your friends, your partners. Where are they now, Mr. Harrington? Where are the people who love you? They're gone. They're all of them because you pushed them away. Because you thought power was more important than love. Because you chose to be alone. Tears were streaming down Victor's face now, snot running from his nose. The veneer of the powerful developer completely stripped away, leaving only a broken man who traded everything that mattered for things that didn't. I didn't mean I never wanted. I know. Lenore stepped closer. Close enough to touch. Close enough that the gun was pressing against her chest. You wanted to matter. You wanted to be somebody. You wanted people to respect you. She reached out slowly, put her hand on his. But respect isn't something you take, Mr. Harrington. It's something you earn, and you can't buy it with money or fear or violence. The gun fell from his fingers, clattered on the floor. Victor Harrington collapsed to his knees and wept like a child. Lenore stood over him, this man who'd terrorized her town for years. This man who'd hit her, threatened her, tried to destroy everything she loved. And she felt nothing but sadness for how small he'd made himself. The door burst open, state police, FBI, badges and guns and authority. They found Victor Harrington on his knees confessing everything. Every bribe, every forged document, every threat. The words pouring out of him like poison finally being purged. An FBI agent approached Lenore. Ma'am, are you hurt? No, officer, I'm fine. This man had a gun on you. He did, but he dropped it. She looked down at Victor. He's just a scared, lonely man who made bad choices, and now he's going to face the consequences. They cuffed him, read him his rights, let him out of the diner he'd tried so hard to steal. Victor looked back once, met Lenore's eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. I hope you find peace, Mr. Harrington. Then he was gone. Garrett rushed in Wolfhound right behind him. Ma, did he? I'm fine, baby. Lenore's legs suddenly felt weak. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. The adrenaline was crashing. The reality of what had just happened was setting in. She'd been seconds away from death. Seconds away from a bullet ending everything. Garrett caught her as she collapsed, held her while she finally let herself cry. Not from fear. From relief, it was over. The boardroom was packed. 12 board members, 30 shareholders, 5 news cameras broadcasting live. The board chairman's face was ashen as he addressed the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reviewed the evidence provided by federal investigators. The files recovered from Mr. Harrington's office paint a disturbing picture of systematic corruption spanning 15 years. He held up a thick folder. Bribery of public officials, forged environmental impact reports, wire fraud, extortion, and yesterday assault and attempted murder of Mrs. Lenore Blackwood, a 79-year-old widow who had the courage to stand up to him. Murmurs rippled through the room. Effective immediately, Victor Harrington is terminated from all positions with Phoenix Crown Development. All corporate assets connected to his activities are frozen pending federal investigation. This company will cooperate fully with law enforcement. The chairman looked directly at the cameras. But termination isn't enough. We failed in our fiduciary duty to oversee our CEO. We enabled a predator to operate under our corporate banner for 15 years. We prioritized profits over people growth, over ethics, expansion, over integrity. His voice cracked slightly. To Mrs. Lenore Blackwood, to the residents of Dusty Ridge, to every person Mr. Harrington harmed, while we look the other way, we are deeply, profoundly sorry. No amount of corporate restructuring can undo the damage. But we commit today to making it right. A reporter shouted from the back, what charges is Mr. Harrington facing? The U.S. attorney has filed 37 federal counts. Bribery, wire fraud, extortion, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. Legal experts estimate 15 to 20 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Another reporter, what about restitution? Every property Mr. Harrington acquired through coercion or fraud will be returned to its rightful owners. Phoenix Crown Development is establishing a $50 million victim compensation fund, and Mrs. Blackwood's diner deed will be delivered to her today, free and clear with our apologies. The news went national within the hour. CNN breaking real estate mogul faces decades in prison for assault on widow 79. Fox News alert, developer's empire crumbles after attack on elderly diner owner. MSNBC Hells Angels nonprofit exposes corruption. Ring saves Arizona town. NBC video of assault goes viral, sparks investigation into corporate crime. Victor Harrington's mugshot was everywhere. Perp walk footage played on loop. Legal analysts dissected the charges. Business reporters cataloged the collapse of his empire. The public destruction he'd inflicted on others for 15 years now turned on him with the full force of media saturation. Poetic justice served cold and broadcast in high definition. 1 week later, Dusty Ridge Sunrise Diner. Lenore sat in the back office, Garrett beside her, Wolfhound standing with 3 envelopes. Mrs. Blackwood, the foundation's board voted unanimously. We'd like to help. He set the first envelope on the desk. What is this? Open it. Inside, a check for $25,000. Lenore's hand went to her mouth. I can't. This is too much. That's for your medical bills, past and future. Every treatment, every medication, every doctor's visit, completely covered. No co-pays, no deductibles, no fighting with insurance companies. Garrett's eyes were wet. Wolfhound, we can't accept. You're not accepting. We're giving. He set down the second envelope. This is a job offer. Manager of Community Programs for Lily's Legacy Foundation. $52,000 annually. Full benefits. Health insurance that actually works. Dental, vision, everything. Lenore was crying now. Why would you do this for me? Because you ran into gunfire to save my brother Marcus Fletcher in Fallujah. Because you raised a man worth following. Because you stood up when everyone else sat down. Wolfhound's voice cracked. Because that's what we do, ma'am. We help the people who help others. He set down the third envelope. Your diner's mortgage, paid in full. You own this building free and clear. No more monthly payments. No more worrying about Victor Harrington or anyone else trying to take it. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it. No words adequate. Wolfhound pulled out a blueprint, unfolded it across the desk. The paper crinkled, revealing architectural drawings in precise detail. Lenore's Place Community Center. Architect Morrison and Associates estimated completion 6 months. The building was 4 stories, modern but warm, respectful of the desert landscape. Ground floor. Wolfhound pointed vocational training, welding, carpentry, automotive repair, computer skills, everything someone needs to build a career. Second floor temporary housing, 20 units for veterans and families in crisis, fully furnished, no rent for the first 6 months while they get back on their feet. Third floor medical clinic, free, staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses, no one turned away regardless of ability to pay. Fourth floor after school programs, GED classes, addiction counseling, job placement services. Lenore stared at the blueprint, at her name on the building, at the legacy being offered on paper. I don't have 6 months, she whispered. The cancer, then we'll make every day count. Wolfhound knelt beside her chair, this massive combat veteran, making himself small before an old woman's grief. Your body might be dying, ma'am, but your impact is just beginning. He pointed to a notation on the blueprint. You'll hire the staff, you'll decide who gets help, you'll build the programs. You'll train the people who'll run this place long after, his voice caught. Long after you're gone. Your legacy won't be measured in months, Mrs. Blackwood. It'll be measured in lives changed. Garrett put his arm around his mother. She leaned into him, tears soaking into his leather jacket. We'll do it together, Ma. Every step. Promise, promise. The cancer was winning. Lenore had maybe 3 weeks left, maybe less. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer didn't follow neat timelines. It consumed, it destroyed. It didn't care about unfinished business or final goodbyes. But she'd spent those 6 months exactly how she wanted. Every morning, Garrett made her coffee. Black, no sugar, the ritual unchanged. They'd sit on the porch of the diner and watch the sun come up over the desert, not talking much, just being together. Making up for 7 years of silence, one sunrise at a time. Every afternoon, Chloe visited after school. Would climb into Grandma Nora's lap carefully now because Grandma Nora was fragile and tell her about her day. About her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. About her best friend, Sophie. About the classroom goldfish that she was absolutely certain understood English and was possibly a secret agent. Lenore lived for those visits, for that little girl's laugh that made the pain recede if only for an hour. Every evening, Ivy would close the diner and the 4 of them would have dinner together. Garrett, Ivy, Chloe, Lenore, a family that had formed not from blood, but from choice, from showing up, from staying when leaving would have been easier. Every Tuesday, Miriam Wade visited, brought flowers, sat with Lenore and told stories about Ethan, about the boy he'd been, the man he'd been becoming, the dreams he'd had. And slowly, story by story, memory by memory, Garrett's guilt began to heal. Not disappear guilt like that never fully disappears, but transform into something bearable. Something that didn't feel like drowning. One Tuesday afternoon, Miriam brought the letter, the one Ethan had written 2 weeks before he died. Garrett read it with shaking hands, Lenore beside him, both of them crying before he finished the first paragraph. Dear Reaper, I know this is weird writing a letter to someone I see every day, but there are things I want to say that I can't say out loud. Guy stuff, I guess. You've been more of a father to me than my real father ever was. He taught me how to be angry, how to break things, how to hurt people. You taught me honor, loyalty, what brotherhood actually means. You never treated me like a kid, even when I acted like one. Every time I fell, you were there to pick me up. Every time I doubted myself, you reminded me why I started writing in the first place. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll earn my full patch someday. Maybe I'll start my own family. Maybe I'll do something that makes a difference. But whatever happens, I want you to know something. You saved my life, Reaper. Not from a bullet or a crash. You saved me from becoming my father. You saved me from being angry and bitter and alone. Because of you, I know what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. To stand for something, to be a man worth following. So thank you for everything. For believing in me when nobody else did. For showing me a better way. I'll make you proud someday. I promise. Your brother Ethan. Garrett finished reading. Looked up at Miriam through tears that wouldn't stop. He didn't blame me. He loved you. Miriam's voice was thick. He worshipped you. And I'm so sorry that I made you carry guilt that was never yours to carry. She reached across, took both of Garrett's hands in hers. My son died because a drunk driver ran a red light. Not because of you, not because you failed. Because sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Lenore squeezed Garrett's shoulder. She's right, baby. But I was his captain. I was supposed to protect him. You did protect him, Miriam said fiercely. You protected him from becoming like his father. You protected him from a life of anger and violence. You gave him 2 years of brotherhood and purpose and feeling like he mattered. That's not failure, Garrett. That's love. Something in Garrett's chest that had been locked tight for 7 years finally opened. The breath he'd been holding since Ethan died released. Not all at once. Healing never happens all at once, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to forgive himself. Enough to start living instead of just surviving. Thank you, he whispered. Miriam pulled him into a hug. This woman whose son he'd failed to save holding him while he cried, whispering that it was okay, that he was forgiven, that Ethan would want him to be happy. And Lenore watched her son begin to heal and knew that whatever time she had left this moment made it all worthwhile. Garrett found Lenore sitting on the porch at dawn, wrapped in blankets despite the Arizona heat. She was staring at the Harley parked in front of the diner. Ma, you okay? I have a request. Anything. I want to ride. Garrett blinked. What? Your motorcycle. I want to ride it with you. Ma, the doctor said you shouldn't. The doctor said I'm dying. I'd rather die doing something I've never done than waste what time I have left being careful. She looked at him. I've watched you ride away so many times. I want to know what it feels like. Just once, we shall all on. Garrett wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Wanted to protect her from one more risk in a life that had already asked too much of her. But he looked at her face, thin now, skin stretched tight over bones, eyes still bright with the fierce will that had kept her alive this long, and realized she wasn't asking permission. Okay, Ma, let's ride. He wrapped her in blankets, secured her behind him on the Harley, made sure she was holding on tight, her frail arms around his waist. Ready? I've been ready for 79 years. He started the engine. The Harley roared to life, that deep rumble that had called to him since he was a boy. They rode through the desert, past the diner, past the cemetery where Frank was buried, past the abandoned copper mine, into the open country where the sky stretched forever and the road had no end. Lenore held on to her son and felt the wind on her face for the first time in her life, felt the freedom that had called to him all those years, understood finally why he'd needed the road, why he'd chosen wheels and leather and the open highway, why coming home had been so hard. I get it now, she shouted over the engine roar. I understand. Understand what? Garrett called back. Why you couldn't stay? Why the road called you? This feeling, it's like flying. Garrett's vision blurred with tears, but he kept riding, twisted the throttle, let the bike surge forward, gave his mother the gift of speed and wind and freedom. They stopped at a scenic overlook, sat on a bench and watched the sun climb higher, turning the desert from purple to gold. Thank you, baby. For what? For this. For coming home. For being here when I needed you most. She took his hand. For being the man I always knew you could be. I wasted 7 years running, and you spent 6 months making it right. That's what counts. She squeezed his fingers. Promise me something. Anything. Promise you'll take care of Ivy and Chloe. Promise you'll give them the family they deserve. The family you deserve. Garrett's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded. Good, she smiled. That's all I needed to hear. Lenore Blackwood died at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Garrett was beside her, holding her hand. Ivy sat on the other side of the bed, tears streaming silently. Chloe was asleep in a chair by the window, thumb in her mouth, unaware that Grandma Nora's breathing had changed, become shallow, irregular, the long pauses between breaths growing longer. Lenore's eyes opened one last time, focused on Garrett's face. I love you, baby. Her voice was barely a whisper. Live well. I love you, Ma. I know, you came back. That's how I know. She smiled. That same smile she'd given him on his first day of school, his high school graduation the day he left to join the club. The smile that said she was proud of him no matter what. Then she closed her eyes and let go. The machine beside the bed let out a long, steady tone. A nurse appeared, checked for a pulse, noted the time. 3:47 a.m. Garrett didn't move, didn't let go of her hand, just sat there holding on to his mother, while Ivy cried and Chloe slept, and the world kept turning like nothing had changed. Even though everything had. 500 people packed the small church in Dusty Ridge. Bikers in leather filled the back pews. Veterans with Purple Hearts and unit patches stood at attention along the walls. Townspeople who'd known Lenore for decades sat weeping in the middle rows. And in the front, Garrett stood at the pulpit, looking out at the sea of faces, trying to find words adequate for a woman who'd given him everything. My mother used to say that angels don't always have wings. His voice cracked. He paused, breathed, continued. Sometimes they wear aprons. Sometimes they have coffee pots. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. A ripple of laughter through tears. She didn't think of herself as special. Never wanted recognition or praise. She just wanted to serve, to love, to make people feel seen. He gripped the sides of the pulpit. I spent 7 years running from this town, running from my mother, running from myself because I thought I didn't deserve her love. And she never stopped waiting, never stopped believing I'd come home. His vision blurred. He wiped his eyes roughly. I'm home now, Ma. I'm finally home. And I promise on everything I am and everything I'll become that I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of your love. He looked at the photograph on the altar. Lenore in her prime, Frank beside her, both of them smiling at a future they'd build together. Rest easy, Angel. You've earned it. He stepped back, sat beside Ivy, who took his hand and held on tight. Wolfhound stood next, this massive combat veteran who'd seen horrors in Fallujah, eyes wet as he approached the pulpit. Mrs. Blackwood saved my brother's life in Iraq. Ran into gunfire. Took 3 bullets, kept him alive for 40 minutes until evac arrived. His voice was steady, reverent. That's who she was. Someone who ran toward danger to save people she didn't know. He looked at Garrett. She raised a man who learned that same lesson, who came home when his mother needed him, who stood between her and evil. That's her legacy, not the diner, not the community center, the people she made better by knowing her. One by one others stood, shared stories, painted a picture of a woman who'd served coffee and saved lives and refused to break even when the world tried its hardest to break her. When the service ended, the Hells Angels formed an honor guard, 2 lines of motorcycles stretching from the church to the cemetery, engines rumbling as the hearse passed between them, a salute to one of their own. 4 months later, Lenore's Place Community Center, grand opening. The 4-story building gleamed in the Arizona sun, modern, impressive, a monument to what's possible when good people refuse to quit. 300 people gathered for the ribbon cutting. Local news cameras, state officials, families who'd already been helped by Lily's Legacy Foundation. Governor Patricia Winters stood at the podium, microphone in hand. Today, we're not just opening a building. We're honoring a woman who showed us what courage looks like. She gestured to the banner hanging above the entrance, Lenore's Place, where angels gather. Lenore Blackwood was assaulted by a powerful developer who thought money made him untouchable. She could have given up, could have sold, could have walked away. Instead, she stood her ground, and in standing, she sparked a movement. The governor held up a document. Today, I'm proud to sign into law the Lenore Blackwood Protection Act. This legislation protects workers and citizens who stand up to corporate corruption. It provides legal immunity for whistleblowers, It mandates investigation of retaliation claims within 48 hours. It establishes penalties for companies that threaten or harm individuals who refuse to be intimidated. Applause erupted. Garrett, standing beside Ivy and Chloe, felt tears on his face. This law has already been adopted by 12 other states, the governor continued. Over 2,300 workers are now protected. 37 corrupt officials have been prosecuted. Hundreds of families have been saved from illegal coercion. She paused. Let the weight of those numbers settle. And it's all because one 79-year-old woman refused to be afraid. The governor cut the ribbon, doors opened. The community center welcomed its first visitors. Inside the building was everything Wolfhound had promised. Training rooms equipped with welding torches and carpentry tools. Computer labs, a medical clinic staffed by volunteer doctors, housing units furnished and ready. Garrett walked through with Ivy, both of them overwhelmed. Your mother did this, Ivy whispered. We did this, all of us. But he knew she was right. None of this happens without Lenore's refusal to break. Without her standing up when standing meant risking everything. Over the next hour, people shared their stories. A rapid-fire cascade of testimonials that painted a picture bigger than any one person. Maria Rodriguez, mother 32. My son needed a heart transplant. Insurance denied coverage. Said it was pre-existing. Lily's legacy paid $82,000. Lucas is 8 now. Plays soccer. Dreams of being a doctor. He's alive because these people refuse to let money decide who lives and who dies. Thomas Barrett, veteran, 58. I came home from Afghanistan with PTSD. Couldn't hold a job. Couldn't sleep. Ended up living in my car in a Walmart parking lot. They found me, gave me housing, counseling, a job at this center. I've been sober for 2 years. I have a daughter who talks to me again. I have a life. Jessica Chen, teenager, 17. My parents couldn't afford college. I was going to work at the gas station, save money for years, maybe take classes part-time. Lily's legacy gave me a full-ride scholarship to Arizona State. Pre-med. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to save lives like they saved mine. Robert Hayes, Korean War veteran, 71. Bank was foreclosing on my house. I'd lived there 30 years, raised my kids there, buried my wife from there. I had nowhere to go. They paid off my mortgage, $16,000. Just handed me the deed and said, you've earned the right to die in your own home, sir. Diane Foster, mother, 45. My daughter Emily had leukemia, same kind that killed Wolfhound's Lily. We needed $200,000 for experimental treatment. Insurance denied it. Lily's legacy paid every penny. Emily's been in remission for 3 years. She starts high school next year. One after another. 7 people. 10. Each story a thread in a tapestry of lives changed. Statistics appeared on screens mounted throughout the building. Lily's Legacy Foundation, 20 years of service. 3. 247 families helped 12.4 million in medical bills paid, 87 homes saved from foreclosure, 423 veterans housed and employed, 89 full-ride college scholarships, 12 community centers nationwide and growing. The numbers told the story, but the faces, the tears, the smiles, the gratitude told the truth. Kindness multiplied. 2 years later, the sign above the diner had been changed. Hand-painted letters in the same style Frank had used 40 years ago. Lenore's Place, where angels eat. Garrett ran it with Ivy. They'd married 6 months after Lenore passed. Small ceremony in the diner after hours. Just family. And 300 bikers who'd shown up uninvited but welcome. Chloe was 6 now, still called him Uncle Garrett even though the adoption papers said otherwise. Called Ivy Mama and talked about Grandma Nora like she'd just stepped out for groceries and would be back any minute. He didn't correct her. Didn't see the point. In her heart, Grandma Nora was still present, still watching, still loving. Ivy was 8 months pregnant, a boy. They were naming him Frank. The annual memorial ride had grown from 93 bikes to 500. Hell's Angels from across the country making the pilgrimage to Dusty Ridge, to the town where an old woman taught them what courage looked like. Garrett stood on the diner steps watching them arrive, wave after wave of chrome and leather and the thunder of engines that never got old. Wolfhound was the first to arrive, 64 now, still riding, still wearing the Purple Heart, still running Lily's Legacy Foundation with the same fierce dedication. How you holding up, brother? Good days and bad days, today's good. She'd be proud of you. You know that, right? Garrett looked at the diner. At Ivy in the window, one hand on her swollen belly, the other wiping down tables. At Chloe at the counter, coloring in the same booth where Lenore used to sit. I hope so. I know so. Wolfhound clapped him on the shoulder. You stayed, you showed up, you built something that lasts. That's all she ever wanted. Garrett was closing up at 7 p.m. when he saw her. A woman, mid-30s, standing beside a broken-down Honda Civic on Route 66, hood up, steam rising, a small child, maybe 3 years old, crying in the back seat. He could have kept driving, could have called a tow truck and let someone else deal with it, could have done what most people do, acknowledge the problem exists and let it be somebody else's problem. But he didn't. He pulled over, got out, approached with hands visible, non-threatening. "Ma'am, you need some help." The woman jumped, spun around. Her face was streaked with tears and desperation and the particular exhaustion that comes from being broke and alone and out of options. My car died. I have to get my daughter to the clinic. She has a fever. I called BOPA, but my membership lapsed and I don't have money for a tow and nobody will." She broke down sobbing. Garrett looked at the child, flushed with fever, whimpering, scared. He thought about Lenore, about second chances, about the choice to help when helping is hard and inconvenient and costs something. "Come on, I'll drive you. I don't have money to pay you." Didn't ask for money. He got them to the clinic in Dusty Ridge, waited while they saw the doctor, made small talk with the nurse who remembered when Lenore used to bring coffee to the night shift. When the bill came $340 for the exam, fever reducer, antibiotics, the woman's face crumpled. I can't." Garrett pulled out his wallet, counted out bills, handed them to the receptionist. "We're good." "Sir, I can't accept." "You're not accepting. I'm giving." He looked at the woman, at her daughter already looking better, fever breaking. "Consider it paid forward." When they came out, the little girl was sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, antibiotics coursing through her system. Crisis averted. "I don't know how to thank you." Garrett pulled out a card, Lenore's place embossed on the front, his number on the back, and folded inside $50 cash. "When you're back on your feet, help someone else. That's all the thanks I need." The woman stared at the card, at the money, at this stranger who'd saved her daughter without asking for anything in return. "I won't forget this. I swear to God I won't forget." "I know you won't." He watched her drive away. Her car had been fixed while they were at the clinic. Wolfhound had sent someone, wouldn't accept payment, said it was what Lenore would have done. And Garrett felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the absence of pain, not the erasure of guilt or grief or loss, but the quiet certainty that he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing, being exactly who his mother raised him to be. He drove back to Dusty Ridge as the sun set, back to Ivy and Chloe, back to the diner, back to the life he'd built from the ashes of the one he'd destroyed. Inside, Ivy smiled from behind the counter. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." Chloe ran to him. "Uncle Garrett, can we get ice cream?" "After dinner, Munchkin." "Promise, promise." He picked her up, felt small arms around his neck, felt the weight of a future that mattered more than any past he could change. Outside, the desert stretched toward the horizon, the same desert Lenore had looked at for 45 years. The same sky, the same stars beginning to emerge. But everything was different now, because one old woman had refused to break, had refused to give up, had refused to let fear win. And in refusing, she'd taught an entire town, an entire movement, what it meant to stand for something. Garrett looked at the photograph behind the counter. Lenore and Frank, young, hopeful, building something that would outlast them both. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, "for everything." The photograph smiled back, silent, eternal. Proof that love doesn't end when bodies fail. That legacy isn't measured in years, but in lives touched. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could hear it. The rumble of engines, the sound of angels riding, the promise that kindness doesn't end. It multiplies. Epilogue. 10 years later. Washington, D.C., National Press Club. Garrett Blackwood stood at a podium facing 200 journalists. 52 years old when this all started. 62 now. Gray in his beard, lines around his eyes. But something fundamentally changed in the way he held himself. No longer running, no longer hiding. Present. Chloe sat in the front row, 16 now, honor student, talking about studying social work, about helping people the way Grandma Nora helped people. Frank was 9, named after his great-grandfather. Obsessed with motorcycles and justice and stories about the grandmother he'd never met. And in Ivy's arms, 3-year-old Lenore. Nora for short, born with her great-grandmother's eyes and stubborn chin. The Lenore Blackwood Protection Act, Garrett began, a voice steady, has now been adopted by all 50 states. He paused. Let that sink in. Over 11,000 workers have been protected from retaliation for standing up to corruption. 47 corrupt officials have been prosecuted. Hundreds of families have been saved from the kind of intimidation my mother faced. He looked at the cameras. My mother thought she was just running a diner, making coffee, serving pancakes. She didn't know she was starting a movement. Wolfhound stood beside him. 74 now. Retired from active riding, but still running Lily's Legacy Foundation with the same fierce dedication. Lily's legacy has expanded to 43 states, Wolfhound said, voice still carrying that combat-forged authority. We've helped over 15,000 families, built 27 community centers, provided over $40 million in assistance. He looked directly at the press corps. And we're just getting started, because Lenore Blackwood taught us that one person standing up can change everything. That courage is contagious. That love is stronger than fear. Questions erupted from the journalists. Mr. Blackwood, what happened to Victor Harrington? Garrett's expression didn't change. He's serving 18 years in federal prison, up for parole in 2034. Last I heard, he's teaching other inmates how to read, making amends in the only way available to him. Do you forgive him? My mother did. That's what matters. What about Phoenix Crown Development? Restructured, new leadership. They've paid over $60 million in restitution to victims of Harrington's fraud. They sponsor 3 of our community centers now. Sometimes institutions can change. Not often, but sometimes. The press conference ended. Garrett walked outside into the DC afternoon, found someone waiting. A woman, 37 now, her daughter 12, both healthy, thriving. Mr. Blackwood, he recognized her immediately. The broken-down Honda, the sick child, 10 years ago on Route 66. Angela, I wanted you to know I kept the card you gave me. I show it to everyone I help. She handed him something. A business card. Angela's Auto Repair. No veteran or single parent turned away, pass it on. I opened my shop 5 years ago, named it after my daughter. We fix cars for free for people in crisis. Because you taught me that's what we do. Garrett felt his throat tighten. How many people? Last count 317, and every single one of them got a card, got told to pass it on when they could. 317 people. Because one man helped one woman. Because one old woman refused to break. Because kindness doesn't end. Angela walked away, but she turned back once. Your mother, I never met her, but I tell everyone about her, about what she started, about how one person standing up can change the world. She'd like that. I know. That's why I do it. Garrett watched her go, then looked up at the Capitol building, at the seat of power, at the place where the Lenore Blackwood Protection Act had passed unanimously, from a diner in Arizona to federal law, from one woman's refusal to a movement that protected thousands. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo, Lenore on the back of his Harley, arms around his waist, face lit with joy as they rode through the desert. We did it, Ma, he whispered. We actually did it. His phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. Frank wants to know if you'll teach him to ride when he's older. I said to ask you. Garrett smiled. Type back. Tell him yes. But first he has to learn what the bike really means. It's not about speed or rebellion. It's about freedom. About choosing to show up. About being there for people who need you. Just like Grandma Nora taught us. He put his phone away. Started walking toward the memorial where they'd be dedicating a plaque later today. In honor of Lenore Blackwood, who taught us that angels don't always have wings, sometimes they wear aprons, sometimes they ride motorcycles, and sometimes they refuse to brake. Behind him in the distance, the sound of a single motorcycle engine. Not Wolfhound, not any of the angels. Just someone riding through DC, going somewhere, the rumble echoing off marble and stone. And Garrett smiled, because angels are always riding, always watching, always reminding us that kindness doesn't end, it multiplies.